"Your chair is broken. Sit on the floor, Mom." Lena said it like a joke, like a tickled little bell, and everyone laughed because that's what you do when someone sprinkles cruelty with sugar. I smiled the way a hostess smiles, and lowered myself beside Adrian's chair, my skirt brushing the hardwood, the frosting candles trembling in their glass holders, as if even wax could feel embarrassed for me. From down here, everything looked different, shoes instead of faces, the hem of Lena's perfect cream dress swishing as she leaned over the cake, Adrian's hand hovering near my shoulder, then retreating because he follows Lena's cues the way a tide follows the moon. The room smelled of her sharp citrus perfume and roasted chicken and the faint private scent of extinguished birthday candles, the sweet ghost that lingers after flame. "Careful, Mom," Lena sang. "That chair really wobbles." The others chuckled, forks chiming. I settled cross-legged on the floor, placing my palm against the leg of the table to steady myself. That's when I felt it, brittle against my fingertips. Tape. Not old gum or a child's sticker. Tape. I slid my hand farther, as if searching for balance, and touched the edged corner of an envelope hidden against the underside of the table. The conversation bubbled above me. Plans for a weekend trip, a joke about parking tickets, a story from our neighbor Liam, who'd stopped by with a bottle of sparkling water because he's been sober for nearly a year now and likes to show his victories in glass. But in the thin hush under the table, my heart had its own quiet room. I peeled one strip of tape with my thumb, feeling the paper free itself with a tiny sigh I could hear only because I was being small. "Do you need a pillow?" Lena asked. "I don't want you to break a hip," she smiled, bright enough to show the new veneers I helped pay for when love was still a shared wallet. "I'm fine," I said, and I was, in the way a stone is fine at the bottom of a lake. I tucked the envelope into the wide sleeve of my cardigan, a simple wool thing with a snag near the cuff that I never fix because some imperfections feel honest. The paper was warm against my skin. I saw, in the instant before it disappeared, the clean blue letters of a clinic's name and a line of numbers like a decision beginning. Adrian bent to help me up. I rose, brushed my skirt, and took my seat again. The good chair. The cake knife flashed. The room returned to its laughter. I kept my hands folded and my breath steady, as if I hadn't just learned that the floor knows secrets the table will never admit. I didn't open the envelope. Not there. Not yet. And when Lena leaned close to blow out the last candle for Adrian, I caught the reflection of my face in the knife. Small, steady, and very awake. The envelope burned against the inside of my sleeve like a small, obedient sun. I poured coffee as if nothing had happened. Steady hand, steady voice. The kind of composure women my age are praised for until it stops serving someone else. Lena licked frosting from the knife and laughed at something Liam said about parking meters. Her citrus perfume sat sharp on the air, cutting through roast chicken and candle smoke. Adrian brushed my elbow. "You okay, Ma?" he whispered, eyes soft, a boy peeking out from a man's face. "Perfect," I said, and set a saucer down so precisely it looked like love. Plates circled, forks chimed. I felt the paper slide within my cardigan, the faint rasp of its edge against wool, and imagined it falling out, landing on the wood with a patient thud. So when frosting smeared under the table, I volunteered to wipe it. "Let me," I said, going down on one knee, the room flipping back into that quiet country where shoes are faces and legs are strangers. The table's underbelly greeted me. Gum fossils, a staple, a pale rectangle of peeled tape on the opposite leg. Not an accident, then. A system. I pressed the cloth to the floor slowly, as if polishing a thought. "Mom, you don't have to do that," Adrian said, kneeling beside me for a moment before Lena called him back with a sing-song. "Birthday boy, make a wish." He stood. Wishes are louder than mothers on their knees. I wiped, rose, smiled. The envelope stayed hidden, obedient to the hollow of my sleeve. And I felt taller than my standing height. We boxed slices for the neighbors. Liam handed me sparkling water to take home, a quiet celebration for his nearly 1-year victory. For later, he said, and his eyes flicked to my sleeve the way a dog notices thunder the rest of us pretend not to hear. I tucked the bottle into a paper bag, slid my keys into my pocket, the metal teeth tapping a code my hands understood. At the door, Lena kissed the air near my cheek. "Next time, we'll get you a cushion," she said brightly, as if comfort were decor she controlled. I thanked her for the lovely lunch. Outside, the winter air bit clean. I walked home slowly, the bag bumping my hip, the envelope warm as a secret I hadn't agreed to keep. In my kitchen, I set the paper bag on the table and the envelope beside the blue savings jar. I traced the sealed flap with one finger, felt the dry ridge like a pulse. Somewhere in the house something ticked, soft, patient, insistent. I slid my nail under the first inch of paper and stopped. Not here, not on a breath like this. I turned off the light, left the envelope facing up, and listened as the ticking grew clear enough to count. The clock on my kitchen wall ticked like a judge with a wooden gavel and all the patience in the world. I set the envelope beside the blue savings jar, then ladled myself a small bowl of tomato soup, the steam fogging my glasses for a second so the room looked kinder than it was. When the fog cleared, the envelope was still there, quiet, rectangular, certain. I cupped the bowl in both hands anyway, because warmth is sometimes the only argument that works on a trembling heart. I didn't open it. Not yet. I rinsed a spoon that was already clean. I straightened the doily under the jar that holds my emergency cash, the one with a frayed edge I never trim. The citrus of Lena's perfume still clung to my cardigan from lunch, a faint halo of someone else's taste, and I pressed my sleeve to my face until all I could smell was wool and soap and me. The clock ticked. The soup cooled. The room waited. I slid the envelope to the very edge of the table where light from the stove brushed it. My nail found the sealed seam and paused. I thought of the way Lena laughed when I sat on the floor, how the sound brightened the room and darkened me at the same time. There was a steadiness in that laughter, as if she were walking heel to toe on a chalk line only she could see. A practiced balance. A performer. Sweetness on stage. Calculation in the wings. The first tier in discipline is always small. I turned the envelope over. White, heavy paper. A faint watermark you'd miss if you weren't looking. The tape had left a matte shadow near the corner, and in that smudge, where the stick had lifted fibers, I saw it. A slanted note in blue ink, the kind of rushed labeling you do when you're sure nobody will read it. 2 words, not a name exactly. Initial, then surname. A. Hart. I said it aloud, soft enough to keep the room from jumping. A. Hart. My son is Adrian Ross, A.R. He has never signed himself as Hart. He married one. I set the bowl down before my hands could shake it onto the table. The clock kept metering the seconds like a metronome in a stern music class, and each tick seemed to ask the same question. Who tapes secrets to the underside of a table and writes a name that doesn't belong to the man sitting at it? I slid the envelope under a saucer, then under the saucer under my palm. I would not open it tonight. I would sleep with the question like a stone in my pocket. And when morning came, I would see who it sank. The first hairline crack didn't come from a shout or a slap of truth. It came from a chair wrapped in silver ribbon. "For you," Lena said, months ago, when the leaves were still stuck to shoes and the air smelled like wet paper, "because you deserve something soft." She kissed my cheek with perfume that bit like lemon on a cut and slid the chair up to my table as if crowning me. It was a pretty thing, cream upholstery with neat buttons, a curved back, legs that looked like they'd studied ballet. I sat, grateful. It swayed. Not much. A polite little tremor. "She's delicate," Lena said, smoothing the cushion, and in the laughter that followed I wasn't sure if she meant the chair or me. Adrian knelt to tighten a screw, smiling like a boy who wants peace. "We'll fix it," he said. But weeks later, the sway returned, and only when I sat in it. Guests took that seat, and found it steady as a pew. I sat, and the floor tilted a breath to the left, as if the house had opinions about me. The second crack was smaller and sharper. A key. "For emergencies," Lena said, holding out her palm like a halo in a commercial. I gave her the spare to my front door, because that is what you do when you're trying to be the kind of mother people write about kindly on holidays. The key left my ring with a tiny cry of metal, and the silence it made afterward was bigger than it should have been. I told myself it was wisdom, preparing, safety. Then, on a Tuesday when rain drummed on the windows like nervous fingers, I found a faint scratch inside my lock. Fresh, silver, a shining thin crescent where there hadn't been one before. A week later, I noticed the chair had a new wobble after I'd spent the afternoon at the dentist. "You must sit too hard," Lena joked, tapping the seat as if scolding a dog. I smiled and stirred soup on the stove, the steam fogging my glasses so the room softened and everyone's edges blurred. When the fog cleared, the chair watched me with its button eyes and said nothing. That night I turned it upside down. There, beneath the seat pad, a film of residue, a rough rectangle where tape had been peeled, fibers lifted in a pale bruise. I pressed my thumb to it and felt the grit of something recent, not old. A hiding place at sitting height, a secret that required me to be lower to see it. I righted the chair and listened to the hallway. My house ticked and breathed. Somewhere a key I'd given away glittered in a purse that wasn't mine. I left the chair by the table and slept light, as if the floor might whisper again. I have learned that shame is loud and proof is quiet. I laid the envelope beside my blue savings jar and opened my notebook, the one with the coffee ring from a rainy bus ride, and began making columns. What I gave, what they said they needed, what returned to me as silence. The kitchen clock ticked like a sewing machine, feeding the thread of my attention through every small hole it could find. Bank transfers first. I printed them at the little kiosk near the pharmacy, the paper warm and a bit chemical, ink still shining. Emergency car repair, rent shortfall, surprise medical bill. The amounts themselves weren't the betrayal, it was the rhythm, always just before weekends. Always after a sudden laughter in Lena's voice on the phone, the way a person sounds when they've found a coupon for something expensive. I flattened the pages with my palm so the creases lay down like stubborn hair. Then the florist. Weeks ago, Lena showed me photos of peonies from Adrian, soft pink like cheeks in stories. In the corner of one screenshot, there, small as a freckle, was the receipt total and a card message. "So proud of us. A heart." My son has never signed himself that way. I pinched the image larger, breath shallow. Delivery address wasn't our building. A suite number I didn't recognize. I copied it into my notebook in tidy numbers, as if that could make it less alive. Perfume next. Not Lena's citrus, which cuts rooms like a knife, but an expensive powdery thing I once liked when I could still afford to like things that didn't last. It rode home on Adrian's jacket one night when he kissed my temple and said, "Work ran late." I pressed the cuff to my nose after he left and felt ridiculous, like a woman counting birds to prove a storm. Still, I wrote it down. Jacket late, powder scent. I took a last look at the chair. Beneath the seat pad, the tape bruise was fresh. Pale fibers lifted as if the wood had been bandaged, and someone kept checking the wound. Under the table, where I had sat like a child, the rectangle where the envelope had clung was clean, new, not a relic, a habit. I put all of it into a neat stack: transfers, florist address, scent, tape marks. The pile was small, almost shy, but when I slid it beside the envelope, the table dipped a breath, as if the weight of my seeing had changed the house. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the doorway a long time, listening to the clock keep time for someone who had just decided not to be hurried anymore. Tomorrow, I thought. And the word felt like a key turning. I picked up my phone to call Adrian and watched my own thumb hover over his name like a helicopter searching a dark field. The kitchen was the kind of quiet that has a temperature, cool as the inside of the fridge when the door is open. The blue savings jar glowed under the light like a loyal dog waiting for a command. On the table, the envelope lay still, the thin ridge of its seal catching light the way a vein shows when you're about to draw blood. "Just tell him," I whispered to the room that loves me back, because I pay all its bills. I tapped his name. The ringtone began, soft, 3 beats. And I hung up so fast the clock sounded offended. I tried a different path. A message. "Can we talk?" I stared until the words evaporated into their truer shape. "Can I save you from what you don't want to see?" I erased the sentence letter by letter, like unknitting a scarf I'd been making for years. On the counter, the bowl from last night's tomato soup waited with a faint red ring, as if it had been kissed and abandoned. I washed it again, even though it was already clean. Water ran. My head cooled. When the faucet stopped, the tick of the wall clock returned like a metronome that wanted me to pick a tempo and stick to it. Proof. Not pleading. I've learned that with a man in love, warnings are just a kind of wind that makes the flames prettier. I set the phone face down and turned the envelope over in my hands. I didn't open it. Not yet. I slid it into a cookbook, spine cracked from the years I cooked for 4, and marked the page with an old receipt. Some secrets should be stored among recipes. They teach patience and measure. I placed Lena's spare key on a saucer by the door, the metal face up, a small moon that would not rise again without my say-so. Liam's bottle of sparkling water sat on the counter where I'd left it. I twisted the cap. The soft pop sounded like applause in a tiny theater just for me. I drank and felt the fizz bite my tongue awake. "Tomorrow," I said to the clock, "we talk to numbers. Not to Adrian, not to Lena. To statements, transfers, signatures. To anyone paid to be boring and precise." I set an early alarm and laid my cardigan over the back of the wobbling chair. The house settled around me, wood remembering where it belonged. In the thin hush before sleep, my phone buzzed on the table, one new notification lighting my name across the dark. I did not turn it over. Banks have a particular smell, paper warmed by printers and the polite sour of old carpet. I took a number and sat beneath a digital clock that blinked each minute as if it were being born. The envelope was at home in the cookbook where patience lives. I kept only my notebook and the small dignity of well-combed hair. When my number chimed, a man with kind eyebrows stood. "Mrs. Hart, good morning. I'm Mr. Klein." He had the manner of someone who has seen every kind of emergency and learned to pour water, not gasoline. We sat. He glanced at my notes and then at me, steady, as if asking whether I wanted truth with or without anesthetic. "Let's begin with visibility," he said, typing. Statements bloomed from the printer, warm as bread. He lined them up with a banker's precision. "You're generous," he murmured. Not a compliment, a diagnosis. We traced the pattern. Transfers on Fridays, new external accounts added, then removed. 2 recurring payments labeled household support, created from Lena's device. He didn't say her name. The system did. "Would you like those canceled?" he asked. I nodded. He slid a form toward me, blue pen placed at the X with tender finality. I signed. There's a small crack the soul makes when it stops being stolen from. Next came locks. "We'll add text alerts for new payees, require in-person approval for changes, and remove trusted device status for anything we don't recognize." His fingers moved, and with each click, I felt the house inside me acquire sturdier doors. He turned the monitor so I could see. There was also an online request to add a co-trustee to your safe deposit box appointment. The date on the screen matched the afternoon I was at the dentist, mouthful of cotton, nodding at a ceiling poster of a beach. "Pending," the screen said. I tasted metal. "Not approved," Mr. Klein added gently. "But it suggests pressure around your estate." He spoke the word estate like a blanket he was careful not to tug too hard. "We can place a hard note. No changes without you here, with ID and a witness." "I'd like that," I said. My voice sounded like it had put on boots. He printed a small stack, one for my records, one for the branch, one for me to hand a future version of myself who might need to remember how to say no. He slid a bowl of mints toward me, the way someone offers courage in paper wrappers. I took one, peppermint biting my tongue awake. At the counter, as I set up the alerts on my phone, a message blinked onto the screen from Adrian. "Dinner tonight at ours? Lena's making soup." I stared at the word soup until it blurred. "Say yes," Mr. Klein said, not looking at my screen at all. "When you're ready." I nodded, pocketed the papers, and felt their weight like a new hinge. Outside, the winter light was pale as stationery. I tucked the forms into my bag and walked home slowly, counting the seconds between my footsteps and the phone's soft buzz returning in my pocket. Another message waiting to be opened, asking if I'd like my chair back. At home, I laid Mr. Klein's papers beneath the blue savings jar like a foundation stone and read Adrian's text again. "Dinner tonight at ours. Lena's making soup." Another followed. "We'll set you at the head." I stared at the word head until it turned into chair, and the chair turned into a trick. If someone wants you lower, they keep you busy with heights. I took my cream chair and turned it upside down on a towel. 2 screws, front left and back right, tightened to a zealot's idea of safety. I loosened each by a quarter turn, just enough that the chair gained a whisper of sway when I pressed a palm to the seat, not a brake, a suggestion. The wood sighed. The house listened. The clock kept time like it was being paid. Then I slid under my table and stared at the underside until the world felt honest again. From the floor, the apron board was a horizon. Dust made its own constellations. In the grain, I saw the pale rectangle where tape had once lived, fibers lifted like a healed scab. I practiced what I had done at Lena's, one hand steadying the leg, the other reaching as if to balance, thumb catching the lip of a concealed envelope. I set a decoy there myself, an old bill folded in thirds, and timed how long it took to remove it without a sound. 3 ticks of the clock if I didn't rush. 2 if I let my breath drop low. The trick wasn't hands, it was attention. You give them a wobble to watch up here, and you take what you need down there. I righted the chair and sat. It swayed the slightest bit, enough that a polite person would offer to help, enough that a performer would see a stage. I rehearsed simple lines in my head, all sugar. This silly chair. I must be sitting wrong. Let me just steady myself. Each sentence was a curtain for my hand. On the counter, the tomato soup pot waited, red as a stoplight. I lifted the lid, smelled the acid-sweet comfort, and thought of Lena's voice on the text. Soup. My cardigan still carried her citrus from earlier. I changed into the wool one that smells like laundry and thyme. I took a photo of the clinic's name on the envelope and put the paper back in the cookbook where Patience lives. Keys on the saucer, bag by the door, a woman ready not to trip. My phone buzzed. "See you at 7. I stood, slipped a napkin into my pocket for later, and pictured their table from the honest angle, low to the ground, where secrets think they're safe. The clock ticked once, twice, 3 times. I locked the door. The hallway smelled like boiled cabbage and laundry steam, the kind of scent that says people are trying. I locked my door and nearly bumped into Mrs. Alvarez, who lives 2 floors down and wears her hair in a tidy bun, as if she's always expecting company. She balanced 2 parcels against her hip, brown paper, neat labels. "For Lena," she said, then lowered her voice the way a person does when confessing to kindness. "They've been leaving these when you're out, private clinic deliveries, always during the day. I sign so they don't get stolen." My keys chimed in my palm. "Clinic?" I asked, casual as a weather report. She tapped the corner of one label with a cheerful pink nail. "Same return address each time. And the courier always needs a signature from A. Hart. Funny, right? I keep saying A. Hart, and the man just smiles." She handed me the smaller parcel. The tape was crisp. The box was light. The same clinic name I had photographed stared up at me with the politeness of a printed font that has nothing to hide. "Thank you, dear," I said. Her eyes searched my face for a story, then decided to let me keep it. We said our goodbyes, The elevator doors swallowed her bows and shoes, and the hallway was mine again, ticking with radiator heat and the patience of old buildings. At 7, I carried the parcel upstairs to Adrian and Lena's, a peace offering wrapped in proof. Lena opened the door in a cream sweater that fell off one shoulder as if elegance were an accident. "There she is," she sang, citrus blooming into the room. "We saved you the head of the table." The words glittered. I smiled and let the glitter fall to the floor. Their apartment wore candles and clean surfaces the way a stage wears light. On the stove, Soup whispered. "Tomato," Adrian said, kissing my cheek, jacket sleeves soft against my skin. I placed the parcel on the counter. "Mrs. Alvarez signed for this," I said, light as air. "Saves you trouble." Lena's hand paused mid-stir, a half-beat, then continued. "She's an angel," she said brightly, "always helping." She slid a chair out for me, the good one, wider than the rest. I let my fingers test the seat. Solid, of course. I chose a different one, smiled like a woman who enjoys variety, and sat. A small sway hummed under my hips. Not much, just enough for a performer to notice the stage. I dropped my napkin. "Oh, clumsy me," I laughed, already leaning, already lower. The room lifted into ankles and chair legs. Candlelight laced the underside of the table. I reached as if for cloth and steadied the nearest leg with my left hand. My right slid forward, slow, breath low. The wood was warm. Dust wrote its soft alphabet along my knuckles. Then, there it was, brittle against the pads of my fingers. Tape. I didn't grab. I learned that from the floor of my own kitchen. Attention first, then proof. I held my breath and felt for the edge of what they thought I'd never see. Tape is a language if you've been humiliated long enough. It says hush with a sticky finger. I pinched the napkin between two fingers and let my body fold into the space beneath their table, as if I were fishing for a fallen pearl. Candlelight made a honey world down there. The grain of the wood ran like a river I could read fast. My left hand steadied the leg. My right hand felt for the brittle edge and found it. One clean strip, pressed hard, like someone had practiced. The trick is breath. You make yourself smaller from the inside out. I let my lungs fall quiet, slid my nail under the tape, and peeled slowly until the first sigh lifted. The envelope loosened with a soft release I felt in my wrist bones. I didn't look at it. Not yet. I tucked it into the open fold of my napkin, gathered cloth and paper in one motion, and rose with a smile people use to say, "Silly me." "Everything okay?" Adrian asked. Spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "Clumsy hands," I said. "Must be the candles." I smoothed the napkin across my lap and felt the rectangular heartbeat settle. In that instant before it disappeared, I'd seen the same polite blue clinic header and a faint gray stamp along the bottom. Results enclosed. In the upper corner, the label that doesn't belong to my son, A. Hart. The room brightened a watt. My face did not. Lena ladled tomato soup into white bowls so glossy they reflected us as ghosts. "Extra basil," she chirped, citrus perfume riding ahead of her like a parade. She slid a bowl in front of me. The steam curled up soft and red, the smell of every apology I've ever made in a kitchen. I dipped my spoon, touched broth to my lip, and watched a tiny red tide ring the rim, a quiet halo, a line I would not cross. Under the table, I let my foot nudge the opposite leg. Another pale rectangle lived there, fibers lifted where tape had been. Not an accident, a habit with corners. The napkin felt heavy now, as if paper could have gravity. I folded it once more, neat, grandmotherly, the kind of tidiness men mistake for safety. "Head of the table suits you," Lena said, smiling as if she'd gifted me a crown you can't see. "You look settled." "Comfort is a choice," I said lightly, and felt my voice put on boots. Somewhere in the apartment a clock ticked, too soft for guests, but loud for anyone listening for truth. I raised my spoon, the metal catching candlelight, and in its curve I saw a small white corner peeking where napkin meets knee. I adjusted, slow. Lena leaned in, eyes glittering, a whisper meant for me alone. "You like the floor, don't you?" she said, sweet as cake. I set the spoon down without a sound and smiled back. The napkin was warm on my knee. The envelope did not move. Lena lifted her bowl and blew lightly, a queen cooling red silk. "Adrian, can you check the calendar for tomorrow?" she asked, casual as a blink. He stood, kissed the top of my head like a reflex, and crossed to the counter where his laptop sat open beside the pepper mill. Tomato steam curled between us. The envelope warmed my knee through the napkin, a small heartbeat I could pretend was mine. "I'll get water," I said, carrying my glass to the sink so the path would take me near the screen without making me a thief. I didn't look, but the laptop did what screens do, announcing its secrets to the room like a parrot that can't help repeating what it hears. A notification slid down. DocuSign. Co-trustee agreement. Pending signature. Another followed. Branch appointment. Trusteeship update. Confirm. And beneath those, a smaller message from the clinic whose blue letters I had already memorized. Statement available. I rinsed my glass slowly, the faucet whispering. Adrian typed, shoulders hunched. He angled the screen away, an old instinct from a boy hiding a report card. "Use the date," Lena said from the table, voice bright as cutlery. "You always forget the symbol." The symbol. Not the year, not the words, just that little flourish people add when they are sure love is a lock only they can open. I turned off the water and dried my hands on a towel as if I had never noticed anything in my life. Back at the table, I took another sip of soup. Basil brushed my lip. The spoon trembled against porcelain, a tiny bell. "Everything all right for tomorrow?" I asked, as if the only calendar that mattered were weather and laundry. Adrian looked up, mouth a brief line. "All good," he said. "Just work things." He smiled the way people do when the mask fits and hurts. The envelope pressed into my knee, steady as a stone in a river. I folded the napkin once more, grandmother neat, and tucked the corner deeper so the white didn't show. Under the table, my foot found the pale rectangle where tape had once lived and rested there, heel to the habit. Lena refilled my bowl, her citrus perfume laying a ribbon in the air. "You should sit at the head every time," she said. "It suits you." I thought of Mr. Klein's blue pen at an X, of hard notes on accounts, of the word estate spoken like a blanket. I thought of the clinic's blue header and the stamp that said, "Results enclosed," as if truth could be folded and posted. "Comfort is a choice," I said again softly. Adrian's laptop pinged once more. Polite, insistent. He closed it with 2 fingers. I placed my hand flat on the table to steady the room and felt the grain answer. I would not open the envelope here, not in their light. Tomorrow, I would visit the place whose letters now lived in my phone. I would let fluorescent bulbs and clipboards tell me the rest. I lifted my spoon. The red halo on the rim glowed like a boundary I had just learned to keep. I didn't sleep so much as float. By the time the clinic unlocked its doors, I was on the bus with the photo of the envelope bright on my phone, the blue header like winter sky you can't argue with. The lobby smelled of hand gel and photocopiers. Fluorescence hummed. A receptionist with a calm braid, her badge said Ria, slid a clipboard toward me as if offering peace. "How can I help today?" she asked, voice soft enough to keep the room from breaking. "I need general information," I said, the way a woman asks about storms she's already seen on radar. "What services?" Ria pointed to a shelf of brochures. Relationship testing, guardianship affidavits, estate confirmations. The brochure paper was thick, polite. On the counter, a stack of sealed white envelopes waited for courier pickup. Same watermark, same neat stamp. Results enclosed. No names visible. Just the quiet certainty of bureaucracy. "Do your reports always go out that way?" I asked, fingertip hovering above the stack without touching. "For privacy," she said, kind and professional. No gossip, no crumbs. The fluorescent light made a halo on the waxy seal. A courier wheeled in a small gray cart, scanned the pile one by one. Beep, beep, steady as a heart monitor. I thanked Ria for the brochures I did not need and sat in a corner chair, listening to the radiator tick like a metronome for people learning a hard song. I didn't open my envelope, not here, under lights that flatten everyone. I took notes instead: suite number, courier schedule, phrases the brochures loved, verified chain of custody, probability index, non-parentage determination, words that fold families with math. Outside, the air had the clean bite of a peeled apple. I crossed to the coffee shop, ordered hot water with lemon, and spread my notebook beside the cup. I texted Adrian and Lena. "Come to mine tomorrow. Gratitude dinner. I'll cook." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, returned. "We'll be there," Adrian wrote. A heart followed, the red emoji kind, bright as a siren. I typed another message to Mr. Klein. "If you're nearby tomorrow evening, could you drop by to return the card I forgot?" He replied with a single word that felt like a hand on my shoulder: "Gladly." At home, I loosened the 2 screws on the cream chair by a quarter turn, just enough for a courteous sway. I laid the good linen on the table, set 3 bowls, and placed the blue savings jar under the runner like a hidden anchor. The envelope went back into the cookbook where patience lives. I stood in the doorway and listened to the clock. It ticked the same way it did yesterday, but tonight each second sounded like a door closing softly, on purpose. Tomorrow, I thought. Bless the table, and then let it speak. By late afternoon, my apartment smelled like simmered tomatoes and clean linen. I set 3 bowls and 1 shallow plate for bread. Folded napkins the way my mother did, into little boats that could carry a person across a hard sea. Under the table runner, the blue savings jar sat like an anchor no one needed to see to feel. I turned the cream chair upside down and loosened 2 screws by a quarter turn, then pressed my palm to the seat until it offered the faintest sway. Not danger. A suggestion. Before they arrived, I slid to the floor and studied the honest angle, the underside where truth prefers to live. I took the envelope from the cookbook where patience waits and taped it beneath the table's apron, exactly where my left hand lands when I steady myself. Tape smoothed, corners firm. I practiced the reach once, breath low. 3 ticks of the clock. 2, if I did not hurry. I put the soup on the lowest flame and let the clock do its work. They came laughing, Lena first with citrus perfume and a white sweater draped off one shoulder like a careless promise. Adrian held tulips and a small bakery box. "Gratitude dinner," Lena sang, kissing the air near my cheek. "You shouldn't have." She glanced at the head of the table as if it had requested her approval. "Sit wherever feels kind," I said. Adrian set the flowers in a jar, sleeves pushed up, a boy peeking out. We ladled soup. We clinked water glasses. I lifted my hands. "Let me say a blessing," I offered, and they bowed their heads in the polite way people do when they love you, but love their comfort more. For food that warms, and walls that hold, and the courage to see what is in front of us, I said. And then I did the impolite thing. I sat on the floor. "Mom," Adrian laughed, half standing. "Your chair." "Wobbly old thing," I smiled, already lowering, already small. From down there, the world became honest. Grain and screws, dust constellations, light ribboning between chair legs. My left hand found the table leg to steady myself. My right slid under the apron board. The tape whispered against my nail, then sighed. 3 ticks. 2. The envelope loosened and slipped into my palm, warm as a secret I had no intention of keeping. I rose with the napkin, smoothed it across my lap, and set the envelope beside Lena's wineglass as gently as a birth certificate. The clinic's blue header gleamed under the lamp, polite as ever. Lena's smile held for a fraction too long, then faltered at the edges like icing in heat. "For comfort," I said softly, my voice wearing boots. "Let's start here." I did not thunder. I did not accuse. I slid a butter knife under the flap and lifted the seal the way a careful woman opens a letter from a far country, expecting a map, finding a mirror. Paper rasped. The first page came free with a professional sigh. Adrian's spoon paused in midair. A red drop fell back into the bowl like a tiny eclipse. Lena's perfume brightened, then thinned. the way scent does when a person's blood learns a new story. Blue header, chain of custody line, case ID. Then the sentence my eyes found as if they had always been training for it. Non-paternal probability, 99.99%. The numbers sat there, square-shouldered and calm. The kind of certainty you can use to level a table. My mouth didn't open, my cheeks didn't burn. The room itself blinked, once, as if the light had thought better of shining. Adrian's face did a small, lost thing I recognized from when he was 7 and broke his favorite truck. A breath in that never found its way out. He reached for the page and did not touch it. "Mom?" he said, voice soft, a boy visiting the edges of a man. Lena set her spoon down carefully, porcelain kissing porcelain. "What is that?" she asked, too bright. In the window glass behind her shoulder, I saw 3 of us. Woman, man, woman, posed like a painting that had finally noticed it was crooked. I turned the page so the words faced daylight. "A report," I said. I traced the gray stamp at the bottom, results enclosed, as if the ink could smudge into mercy. The clock on the wall grew loud, measuring our heartbeats in public. Under the runner, the blue jar pressed its round weight into the wood. Above it, my hands were very still. "Nonsense," Lena said, smiling with too many teeth. "These things can be wrong. Mail mix-ups, typos." She lifted her wine and set it down without drinking. The glass left a wet ring the exact size of a promise that will not hold. "I found it under your table," I said, and watched the sentence land. No one moved toward the soup again. Steam thinned and disappeared. Adrian's gaze slid to the envelope, to my face, back to the blue header as if he were choosing which truth would hurt least. The apartment fell into a silence that had edges. Somewhere in the hallway, a neighbor's television laughed at something stupid. In our little room, the laugh did not find oxygen. I folded the report once, neatly. "We'll need a witness," I said, almost to the air. Lena's eyes flicked to the door, quick as a deer checking wind. The clock ticked. Someone breathed. No one blinked first. I kept the report folded once, neat as a bandage, and set a second envelope beside it, the thin cream one I brought from the branch, the one with Mr. Klein's blue sticky note like a quiet flag. "Before soup goes cold," I said, "we should decide whose hands hold my house." The room did a small shiver. Adrian reached for his water and didn't drink. Lena smiled with the brightness of a hallway light that's about to burn out. I slid the papers free. On top, a printed DocuSign summary, the kind that pretends handwriting with elegant curls. "Co-trustee agreement, pending signature," it read. Below, the phrase that made my gums taste metallic, "to simplify decisions as Mom ages." My name appeared in tidy boxes, as if a life were a form. A second page showed Adrian's signature, not the left-leaning impatience he's had since school, but a perfect script font, obedient and pretty as a wedding invitation. I set it between the bowls, steam thinned to a ribbon. "This isn't mine," Adrian murmured, eyes running from ink to mother to wife. "I didn't sign this." "You clicked," Lena said softly, eyes never leaving me. "It's all digital now. Everyone does it." She turned her spoon in the soup like a compass hunting north. The citrus of her perfume sharpened the air. I placed the next sheet on the wood. A branch notice noting, "In-person witness required, no changes without original ID." The blue sticky note from Mr. Klein peeked from the corner. A single word in his careful hand, "Hold." Under the runner, the blue savings jar pressed its quiet roundness into the table like an oath. "And this," I said, sliding out the final page, heavy paper, raised seal, the one that lives in my fireproof tin with passports and old-school photos. My deed, not a copy, not a screenshot, not hope, real. My name stood there in stubborn black, owner of the small square of air I sleep inside. I set a butter knife across the top, like a paperweight, as if steel could keep a roof where it belongs. Lena's smile held, but her eyes ran. "We're just trying to help," she said. "You've been Forgetful. Remember when you left the stove on? She glanced at Adrian as if offering him a raft. He stayed standing, hands open, the boy in him floating up and looking around at the room like it had changed languages. I remember, I said. I also remember who called the branch during my dentist appointment. I tapped the DocuSign printout with one finger, gentle. The clock on the wall ticked like a soft hammer. The soup cooled. The apartment listened. We'll need a witness, I said, for clarity. Somewhere down the hall, the elevator cables sighed, a polite metal exhale, and the air in the room learned how to wait. The elevator sighed, and then came the knock, polite, 2 beats, like someone asking permission to return something small. I opened the door to Mr. Klein in a navy scarf, cheeks pink from the cold, a slim folder tucked under his arm. You left your card, he said, voice pitched to soothe. He lifted it like a waiter presenting a bill no one could argue with. May I come in for a moment? Please, I said. The soup's steam had dwindled to a whisper. The deed lay under the butter knife like a roof held down with steel. Beneath the runner, the blue savings jar pressed its round oath into the wood. The clock ticked, 1, 2, counting us into truth. Mr. Klein set the card beside the documents and kept his hands visible. For everyone's clarity, he said gently, looking at Adrian and then at Lena, Mrs. Hart has secured her accounts. Automatic payments labeled household support have been canceled. No new payees can be added without her in-person approval and ID. Safe deposit access changes require a witness. A hard note is on file. He placed a small branch slip on the table, wrote the time, and initialed it with a blue nib that didn't scratch. This is simply acknowledgement that I repeated those protections in front of both of you. We don't need this, Lena said with a smile that showed every tooth. It's family. Clarity comforts banks, Mr. Klein replied, the way rain comforts fields. He turned to Adrian. Do you understand what's in front of you, sir? Adrian stood with his hands open, as if a bird had just flown from them, and he wasn't sure whether to be relieved or bereft. He began, then stopped, eyes catching on the DocuSign curls, the raised seal, the blue header that said, Results enclosed, even when the page was folded. Lena's phone lit the underside of her jaw. A message preview flickered and died. She set the device face down as if tucking in a child. This is humiliating, she whispered, citrus perfume brightening and then thinning like a candle about to gutter. I slid my palm flat on the table. The grain answered. Humiliation happens in the dark, I said. This is light. Mr. Klein glanced toward the hall. If you'd prefer privacy, I can step outside and wait. No, I said softly, and my voice put on boots. He nodded, folded his hands, and let the room breathe. Adrian looked from the wobbling chair to the steadier one, then back to me. His fingers hovered over the papers without touching. Somewhere deep in the building, the elevator cables exhaled again, a long metal sigh, and the clock answered with a single click that sounded like a question he would have to choose how to hear. Silence can be a kind of fire. It burned around the soup bowls, around the butter knife holding the deed, around the blue savings jar pressing its quiet oath beneath the runner. I set my palms flat on the wood and felt the table steady my spine. Adrian, I said, and my voice surprised me by not shaking. I won't argue with feelings. I won't wrestle with stories. I will only correct the paperwork that tries to move my roof without my hands. Lena laughed once, bright, brittle. She's making this legal, she said to the air, as if the air could take her side. Citrus perfume flashed, then thinned. Mr. Klein remained near the doorway, a calm witness in a navy scarf, eyes soft, the way people look at windows during storms. Adrian swallowed. He looked 12 for a breath, then 30-something again. I didn't sign that, he said, tapping the DocuSign curls without touching. I never would, Mom. I wouldn't. The word Mom fell into the room like a coin in a deep well. We all listened for the splash. You clicked, Lena said, still smiling, but the corners of her mouth trembled like a ribbon trying to be a rope. It's modern life. I turned the report so the blue header faced the ceiling and slid it an inch toward Adrian. "This isn't about punishment," I said. "It's about light. If there's another story, we can invite it in, but it has to walk on its own feet." The clock answered me with a tick that sounded like a footstep. I stood and nudged the cream chair, the one I had loosened, so it swayed a polite inch. Then I placed the steadier chair opposite, legs square. "2 seats," I said softly. "One made for performance, one for weight. You choose where to sit for this conversation." Adrian looked from chair to chair as if they were 2 futures. His hand hovered over the wobbling backrest, then drifted to the solid one, then away from both. Lena's phone lit her jaw again. A message glowed and vanished. She touched his sleeve. "Don't entertain this," she whispered. Sweetness poured like varnish. "It's humiliating." "Humiliation happened under tables," I said, and my voice put on boots. "This is just a woman standing up in her own house. Mr. Klein cleared his throat gently, not to interrupt, only to remind the air that witnesses breathe. The soup had cooled into a red mirror. In its shine, I saw Adrian's face split by indecision, 2 versions of him blinking. "Sit," I said, not loud, not pleading. "Not for me, for the truth you can live with tomorrow." The apartment listened. A radiator clicked like a metronome counting us in. Adrian pulled a chair an inch, wood whispering against wood, then let go, fingers opening as if a bird had just lifted from them, and hovered. Adrian reached, finally, and drew the steady chair toward him. Wood kissed wood. He sat with both feet flat, palms on his knees, breathing like a man who has found ground after a long swim. Lena stayed standing, one hand on the wobbling chair as if it were a podium. Her citrus perfume brightened, then thinned. Mr. Klein waited near the door, the navy scarf a quiet border between storm and hallway. "I'm sorry," Adrian said, eyes on the deed under the butter knife, then on me. "I didn't sign. I didn't know." The boy in him blinked, then lowered his head like a pledge. I nodded once, because mothers know the difference between confession and performance. I slid a small white envelope from my cardigan, the one that carried her spare key for emergencies. The paper was soft from months of purse and pocket. I set it on the cream chair's seat, the one loosened by a quarter turn. "Lena," I said softly, "this belongs to you. Or rather, it belongs not to you." Her fingers tightened on the backrest. "You're overreacting," she said, but her voice came out thin. She tried to smile. It wobbled more than the chair. "No more jokes at my table," I said. I did not raise my voice. I set my palm flat on the wood, felt the grain answer, the blue savings jar pressing its round oath beneath the runner. "No more hidden things under furniture. No changes to what keeps my roof where it is, not without me, in person, with witness." I glanced toward Mr. Klein. He inclined his head and made a neat note with his blue pen, the nib whispering like a seal. Adrian touched the DocuSign printout with 2 fingers, then drew his hand back as if from a stove he finally saw was hot. "Whatever this is," he said to Lena, "it stops." Silence arrived, not as a punishment, but as space. I lifted the soup ladle. Tomato steam rose again, humble and red, carrying the smell of kitchens where apologies are cooked slowly and served warm. I filled 3 bowls. "Eat," I said, and set one in front of my son, one near the steady chair across from him, and one at my place. The 4th bowl stayed empty, the butter knife still anchoring the deed like a silver horizon. Lena reached for the white envelope and didn't open it. She set it on the table, then stepped back, then farther, as if measuring a room she thought she owned. Somewhere in the building the elevator sighed, polite as ever. The clock ticked, 1, 2, counting our new weather. We ate in quiet. The red halo on each rim dried into a thin ring I wouldn't wipe yet. When the bowls were half empty, my phone buzzed once on the counter, a calendar reminder for a branch appointment I'd made as a just in case. I let it fade. After the dishes, I walked to the doorway and held out Adrian's coat. "You're welcome here," I said. "Both of you are, if you can sit without hiding anything underneath." My voice wore boots, and it fit. The keys on the saucer by the door looked small and perfect. I left only mine.